And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, March 4th, 2013, start of a brand new week. Got a lot of stuff to talk about coming in from the weekend. We're currently watching on the corporate media, apparently a U.S. military Learjet, you know, the one that all the officers ride around in, is about ready to make an emergency landing. The landing gear apparently not properly maintained, and they're going to belly flop that onto the runway. And they're making big news and ambulances, and if the pilot knows what he's doing, he'll put it down and he'll scratch up the paint on the bottom of the aircraft, and they'll all walk away. Alrighty, a lot of stuff to talk about. Manny's in our control room. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. A reminder that this Thursday, we're going to have Brian McCall. He's a law professor at the University of Oklahoma, and he's going to be talking to us about the history of usury and the reason why ancient religions prohibited it. Didn't just come out of thin air that so many of these ancient religions banned this kind of practice. They'd seen what it did to their cultures. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Big news, of course, is this weekend started the AIPAC conference in Washington, D.C., and all of the members of Congress are over there making obeisance to Tel Aviv. And their agendas are, of course, sending American kids to make war on Iran, and making sure that in the midst of all this economic devastation in the United States of America, that flow of money from your pockets continues to go to Israel. And they're trying to achieve this special status of strategic Mideast ally, which Israel feels will protect funding for Israel from any consideration of cuts, completely off the table. Cut everything else. Cut schools, cut hospitals, cut education, but that money must keep flowing to Israel because they're a major strategic ally. And money to them is sacrosanct. It is a holy tithing, whatever. So, what I all need you to do, you all need to phone and fax your Congress critters. Remember, email pretty much is ignored these days. And you need to remind them, no government can serve two masters, and that anyone who serves Israel will not be getting your vote next election. And you might remind them how of the last election, a lot of Israel supporters got trimmed out of Congress, which is why Hagel got confirmed. Now, you'd better make a stink about this, or Congress is going to sell your children into Israel's bondage unto several generations into the future. You can go over to congress.org and find the contact information for your Congress critters. So AIPAC is out there running in rock and roll full tilt boogie to protect Israel from the sequester. And it's almost embarrassing over there. Michael Kasson, who's the head of AIPAC, is warning isolationism is extremely dangerous for Israel. And what he's basically saying is that Israel needs to go out and it needs to start recruiting for political support outside their traditional Jewish support inside the United States of America. They're going to start evangelizing into the Christian Zionists and any other group they can get for support. Because without Americans paying Israel's bills and Americans fighting Israel's wars, Israel's going to have to kind of learn how to get along with their neighbors, and they just absolutely do not want to do that. Now, we are seeing a backlash. Especially at this hard time. We have so many Americans on food stamps. We have so many Americans going hungry and homeless and jobless. Americans are very angry over all of this constant obeisance to AIPAC, especially after the spy scandal from a few years ago. And they're wondering, why are they working so hard to try and pay down the government debt when the government is simply taking that money, a significant portion of it, and shoveling it onto Israel? Especially since it's in violation of U.S. law. So that is the essence of the debate. How dare you Americans refuse to send your money to Israel? What kind of anti-Semites are you? And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the AIPAC conference in Washington, D.C., and it is creating a bit of a backlash. Several groups have mounted large ad campaigns all around the venue, including billboards, and one group even has a truck-mounted ad that is literally going to drive alongside as the people are coming and going to this AIPAC meeting. So there is a backlash, and the people are making themselves heard. Look, if our economy is so bad that our government cannot pay its debts, before you start cutting services to America, roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, food stamps, job creation, You should cut off all this money going across our borders, especially if that money going across our borders is in violation of United States laws. And I refer, of course, to the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act, both of which forbid U.S. financial aid to any nation in possession of nuclear weapons technology that refuses to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty and refuses IAEA inspections. Now, I got an email the other day reminding me that there is a provision in both those laws where the president can sign an exemption for a nation. But the instant the president signs an exemption for Israel, they're basically admitting they do know that Israel has nuclear weapons, and they have been hiding it from the American people in their rush to scream about Iran's power stations and medical isotopes and the rest of it. Which, in this particular point of time, the fact that the U.S. government is lying to you, I realize is not a huge shock. 20, 30 years ago, it would be. 20, 30 years ago, Americans genuinely believed that whatever their government told them was the plain, unvarnished truth. Now we know otherwise. Now we know that when we get the truth, it is a rare and precious occurrence and ought to be celebrated. Set off the fireworks, wave the banners. The government actually told us the truth about something. Huzzah, huzzah! But there is a backlash. People are tired of working hard and sacrificing to save the bankers, to save the auto industry, to prop up Wall Street, and on top of all that, insult to injury, to keep on sending money to Israel, which Israel turns around and uses to subvert our government. It's a giant kickback scheme. Congress votes more of your money to go to Israel. Israel launders it through various organizations, brings it back into the United States of America, and uses it to fund the campaigns of more congressmen who will vote them more money. It is a gigantic scam. And we need to understand, AIPAC is a lobby that supports foreign interests, but they're not required to register as a foreign lobbying group, which frees them from certain controls that other countries have to abide by. Anytime you see this special exception for Israel, that's a sign of the corruption that Israel has brought here. Anyway. Getting on to some other things, Eric Holder has waded into the gun control debate, saying now that homegrown terrorists, meaning any unhappy American with a high-capacity magazine, is a threat equal to the terrorist threat overseas. Now, given that most of that terrorist threat is made up anyway, Eric Holder is kind of actually accurate in this. But of course, that's not what he's saying. He's saying that you, the American people, are now a danger to national security. And I have a news flash for all of you. You, the American people, are the nation. Washington, D.C. isn't the nation. The nation is made up of 330+ million doctors, teachers, bakers, bricklayers, carpenters, homemakers. That's the nation. Not this bunch of lawyers and hereditary millionaires in Sodom on the Potomac. So when you hear the phrase national security, what they're really talking about is their own security. Stopping at the Beltway. They don't really care about what goes on outside there. You can see it every day. Walk through your local community and you'll see the deteriorated roads. Last night, Claire and I were out for an event. We were driving along. We hit a pothole that was so deep, and I didn't see it until it was too late to miss it. We literally bottomed out our car. But we're going to send money to Israel. Yes, you're going to have to drive on deteriorated roads and collapsing bridges. You know, there's a war on, but by golly, we're going to guarantee that money keeps going to Israel. Everyone likes to talk about, you know, the billions in overt aid that goes to Israel, but there's a lot more that's covered under Black Project budget. The U.S. government will provide loan guarantees to Israel and then forgive them down the road so Israel doesn't have to pay it back. Plus, apparently, Israel has been selling bonds denominated in the U.S. dollar. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the line here. But getting back to this whole situation, Eric Holder is now out there trying to portray American supporters of the Second Amendment as an equal terrorist threat to the terrorist threat overseas. That's how desperate they're getting. Now, a while back we were talking about Joe Biden, who was trying to insist you don't need an AR-15 to protect your home. Just get a shotgun. And, of course, I pointed out the stupidity of that because what happens if you walk into your living room and at the other end of the living room there's some maniac who's off his SSRIs, or on them, doesn't really matter, and he's got your spouse with a knife to his or her throat. If you open up on him with a shotgun, you're going to take out your loved one as well. Now, maybe Joe Biden secretly desires an opportunity to trade up his wife, which is why he's thinking in these terms. But with an AR-15, you can put one round and one round only where you want it to, which is between the eyebrows of the person with the knife at the throat of your loved one. Well, not content with having been exposed as a moron for that particular piece of advice, Joe Biden is now telling homeowners that you can fire your shotgun through the door if you think somebody on the other side is intending you harm. Now, if you have a solid core door, shotgun blasts aren't going to go through it unless you're using double-aught Magnum or deer slugs. But what happens when you take out the pizza delivery girl? Biden is clearly clueless about this. He doesn't understand home defense. Or he's just out there saying anything he can think of to get those military-style weapons out of your hand before the realities of the economy are finally too manifest to be ignored. Of course, if you start firing the shotgun through the front door, it's going to start cutting down on all the Bible bangers knocking on your door asking if you found Jesus. Have you lost him again? This is the third search party I've had this week. Really ought to put a GPS tracker on him like they do the Alzheimer's patients. Now, we've all been hearing these stories about kids who are being suspended from school for drawing pictures of a gun or just pointing their finger or shaping their pastry into a gun shape. And apparently there was an entire county shut down their schools, put them on lockdown for 20 minutes because this 19-year-old Ambridge area high school student had a ringtone on his cell phone, which is the theme song from Fresh Prince. And the line from the song is, "And all shooting some basketball outside the school." And somebody heard shooting and school and hit the panic button. All this crying wolf is going to do is result in a situation where real shooters are going to be ignored. There's a shooter in the hallway. Probably another false alarm. This anti-gun hysteria, they're counting on that to try and get the American people to say, we don't need a Second Amendment. We can trust the government to take care of us, which is what the Native Americans thought when they signed all those treaties. Up in Turner, Oregon, they held one of these unannounced school lockdown drills. Had an actor come across the fence carrying a long stick that looked like a rifle. Everybody screamed and panicked and ran. That's not a drill, it's propaganda. The point of a drill is to train people how to react orderly to an intrusion, not panic them and send them into mass hysteria. When you have a drill, you say ahead of time, we're going to have a drill. Have you ever seen a school fire drill where they set a fire and don't tell anybody ahead of time? Of course not. They say, this is what you do in a fire, we're going to have a drill, here's the drill, practice what we taught you. But this idea of just sending make-believe shooters into a school to scare everybody is designed to send those kids home traumatized to their parents saying, please do something about all these guns. That's all it is. The U.S. government in this anti-gun campaign are the biggest terrorists in our land. They're terrorizing our school children to sell this anti-gun agenda. Getting more reports of citizens, law-abiding citizens with legally owned firearms, thwarting crimes in progress. Civilian shoots would-be robber during attempted bank holdup. Elderly man shoots and kills repeat offender attempting to break into his home. And with the Obama administration having released all those illegal aliens from jail, most of whom were criminals to begin with, we're going to see a lot of that going up. Interesting little story from Essex County. Apparently they were trying to find an illegal weapon, and the police dog accidentally discharged the weapon, pawing at it. So I want to know if that dog was on SSRIs or coming off of them here. And one more thing. Everyone keeps screaming that Newtown was the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history, and it is not. In 1890, the U.S. government shot and killed over 290 unarmed Indians at school, including over 200 women and children. And by the way, those Indians had given up their guns as well. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're still watching on the corporate media that story about the U.S. military Learjet preparing to make an emergency landing at Lambert Field in St. Louis. They've been saying it's preparing to make an emergency landing for 20 minutes now. I think if it goes another 10, they ought to shoot it down. Of course, I'm just kidding. What they're doing is they're burning off the excess fuel. They want to hit the ground there with as little in the tanks as possible, because we know from TW800 just how dangerously explosive JP1 kerosene is. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. I'm sure they're going to be just fine. This is what you do when the landing gear fails here. Now, getting back to the gun control issue. Because of the new, tougher laws in California, Californians are now going over to Nevada to buy the weapons they feel they need to protect themselves. And remember, setting aside the whole issue of defense against tyranny and a government that is buying hollow point ammunition and now armored vehicles to deploy against a very angry American people, codenamed zombies, the reality is we have a right to keep and bear arms equal to those in the hands of the criminals. And the criminals are getting all the weapons they want from, well, like Fast and Furious. So the Californians are going over to Nevada, and we saw exactly the same thing following the Rodney King riots in Southern California, where in one of the most incredibly boneheaded moves I've ever seen, while the police were running like crazy to get out of the way of the rioters, the Los Angeles City Council passed an ammunition ban. You could not buy any ammunition in the county of Los Angeles, which meant people were driving on down to Orange County, stocking up, bringing it back, and selling it at a premium. Sadly, mostly to the rioters. So, anyway. Now, there's a new video out. It's being put out by CCRKBA, and it features some law enforcement professionals demonstrating that the size of the magazine in your rifle does not have any effect on how fast you can fire. In this video, a man fires 20 rounds from an AR-15 using a single magazine. He gets all 20 shots off in 12.16 seconds. He then repeats it using two 10-round magazines, and he actually got the shots off faster, 10.73 seconds. A lot of it having to do because the AR-15 is not full auto. It's basically how fast he pulls the trigger with his finger. So this idea that high-capacity magazines, if you ban them, it's going to stop the mass shootings, it's completely disproven. If you want to ban the mass shootings, you have got to look into this link between these prescription antidepressants and acts of mass violence. By the way, for our listeners on the island of Oahu, last night Claire and I got to see a preview of a play over at the Manoa Valley Theater called Next to Normal. This thing won all kinds of Tony Awards. It's a musical about mental illness. And it sounds like a weird concept, but it's really a very good play. If your life has been touched by somebody suffering mental illness or substance abuse, there are a couple of squirm-in-your-seat moments, but it was very, very well done. I think my favorite moment in the show was a song number called My Psychopharmacologist and I. And it just takes to task these doctors, you know, take this one with this one, but not this one. Take the blue with the white, but not with food. And just, well, that didn't work. Let's try another one. And really it just exposed the whole thing here. The doctors are definitely not the heroes of this story. Anyway, if you live in Oahu, Manoa Valley Theater, it starts this Thursday, and it is a really well done show. And the show, it was just, again, if you've had your life touched with these kind of things, it's maybe a little uncomfortable. But it's a very modern, up-to-date show here about modern life in America. It even mentions Photoshop, for those who think musical theater is archaic here. Alrighty, so we're seeing again the gun grabbing is still going on. They're still trying to find some way to settle it. And more people are asking, if the government simply declares turn in your guns, will you fight back? That obviously is something you're going to have to decide for yourself. And it is a very, very tough question here. I'd like to avoid violence myself, but not at the price of slavery. And I want to read you a quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago, and how we burned in the camps later thinking every security operative, when he went out at night to make an arrest, had been uncertain whether he would return alive and had to say goodbye to his family. Or if during periods of mass arrests, as for example in Leningrad, when they arrested a quarter of the entire city, people had not simply sat there in their lairs, paling with terror at every bang of the downstairs doors and at every step on the staircase, but had understood they had nothing left to lose, and had boldly set up in the downstairs hall an ambush of half a dozen people with axes, hammers, pokers, or whatever else was at hand. The organs would very quickly have suffered a shortage of officers and transport, and notwithstanding all of Stalin's thirst, the cursed machine would have ground to a halt. If we didn't love freedom enough, and even more, we had no awareness of the real situation, we purely and simply deserved everything that happened afterwards. We'll be back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So a lot of people are starting to wonder, is civil unrest here in the United States inevitable? And even Sarah Palin is out there commenting on the fact that the federal government is stockpiling these hollow point man-killer bullets, apparently for civil unrest, because you don't waste money on hollow points for target shooting. Hollow points are designed to kill. They are actually illegal to use in warfare on enemy troops. Under international treaty, when you're at war with another nation, you have to use full metal jacket, non-expanding ammunition. Hollow point man killers, of course, are going to be used against the American people. And this kind of reminds me of the situation down in Waco, Texas, where the government gassed that church full of women and children to death with a poison gas that is illegal to use on enemy troops in time of war. So the U.S. government is basically being more humane with their enemies than with the American people. Now again, the federal government may be optimistic. They may be buying all this ammunition in the sincere belief that your average little civil servant file clerk over at the Department of Mineral Resources or the Office of Statistical Analysis is going to man the barricades against an enraged American people. I don't see that really happening, to be very, very honest. But sort of upping the ante, the Department of Homeland Security has apparently purchased 2,700 light armored tanks to go with their 1.6 billion bullet stockpile. They have bought what are these called mine-resistant protected vehicles for service on the streets of the United States. In fact, 2,717. And it's nicknamed the Street Sweeper. It's got gun ports on the side so they can sit inside safely and shoot at you. How very democratic. We actually had one of these as a prop on the pilot for Hawaii 5-0, and they're very impressive to look at. Very mean-looking vehicles. Of course, the good news is, with the condition of our bridges in this country, if one of those drives across a bridge, the whole thing's going to collapse. And that pothole that we hit in the road last night might even take a wheel off of these things. But the upshot of it is that Washington, D.C., ever faithful servant of Israel, is preparing to invade the United States and turn it into the new Palestine. Obviously, the advice you need to take away from this is, if you are a shooter and value your Second Amendment right to throw off tyranny, you probably ought to be buying ammunition right now and stockpiling it yourself. Buy whatever you can find, whenever you can find, before the government buys it all up. Because if there is an economic crash, ammunition makes a great barter item. You could see an entire post-collapse monetary system based on ammunition. You know, what's this can of beans cost? Oh, that's 130-06 and 322s. Now, over in Italy, the situation is deteriorating there, and we're already beginning to hear rumbles consistent with my forecast of what was going to happen in the wake of the recent elections. Now, Italy's President Giorgio Napolitano is going to try and create a second technocrat government, meaning appointees, pro-bankers, not representative of the people. The Bank of Italy's Governor Ignazio Visco is front-runner to be the Prime Minister. The bankers want control of that country. Morgan Stanley says there's now a 30% chance of a crisis and a new election. So we're seeing a repeat of what we saw in Greece. Greece held elections last year. The anti-banker party won. The pro-banker politicians dug in their heels, refused to form a coalition government to force a second election, which was marked by rampant and obvious vote fraud to get the bankers back into power over the people of Greece. Now, Beppe Grillo, the comedian who was the big winner in Italy's elections, despite the opposition of their commercial corporate media, is saying his agenda is for Italy to abandon the euro, go back to the lira, and deal with its debt in its own way, meaning probably default. And the bankers don't want that because it would cave the euro and the European Union and trigger those $97 trillion worth of default swaps Wall Street sold on Europe's debt. So I hope Mr. Grillo has his Kevlar undies on, because people who go up against the bankers, they get shot at. Happened in our country to Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, and John F. Kennedy. Now, over in Greece, the Greek military is getting prepared for mass repression of the public. The Greek people have had it with austerity. They've had it with you must make do with less so we can have more. And the pro-banker government of Greece is now organizing. They've hired all these Blackwater security experts to come on in and prepare for a complete military crackdown of the Greek people, to point guns at their heads and say, you give us your last euro. You work hard, give us the money, that is the only future that you have. And of course the U.S. will do nothing about it, because the U.S. is only opposed to military crackdowns on people in countries we don't like, that are sitting on a lot of oil. Portugal is protesting against austerity. More than 20 cities in Portugal had simultaneous demonstrations. The entire world is rising up against this global fascist banking cartel. And whether it gets bloody or not, or how bloody it gets, is going to be entirely, sadly, up to the bankers, who history shows are perfectly willing to send hundreds of millions of ordinary people to their deaths to maintain their stranglehold on the economy of the planet. Now, we're still hearing about sequestration and the budget cuts, and even though Obama signed the bill for $85 billion in spending cuts, which is really just, it's a tiny smidgen of the total federal budget, and everybody's making a big, huge deal about it. And they're already back here this week talking about, can we still make a deal to reinstate the cuts? And every deal they're talking about is an increase in taxes on you. That's their only solution. They're going to absolutely protect all the money going to Israel. They're going to protect all the money going to Wall Street, all the money going to the military, and they're just going to turn around and say, you American people, got to give more. Maxine Waters is out there just hysterically waving around the fact over 170 million jobs could be lost due to sequestration. Population of the country is only 330 million, Maxine. And let me explain something about sequestration. Most of these cuts are going into bureaucracy. They're going to let these workers go. These workers are then going to be available to do jobs that might actually do some good for the country. Manufacturing products that we can export, growing non-GMO agriculture that we can export, go out and start fixing the roads and the bridges and the schools and the hospitals. I think it would be a great thing if the entire federal government shut down and all those people on federal paychecks started to do something useful for a change. Going to grab a phone call here. George in Texas. Aloha. George, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Just want to remind the listeners that Texas independence was derived from being free from bankers' slavery, because in 1824, Mexico printed up all these bonds, and all these bonds were sold to European investors and bankers. And as these people who held the bonds, they ordered Santa Anna to go out and oppress the people of Mexico at the time. And the thing is, when the Texas War of Independence, it wasn't just Texas that was at war with Santa Anna and his army. It was also all of Mexico, because they raised the taxes and everything. And that's why the Mexican War happened years later, is because Santa Anna needed land and resources to make good on them bonds, and didn't quite work out.
No, it didn't. Thanks to Sam Houston.
Yes, and the thing is, I went to the Washington on the Brazos, and they had Texas National Guard there, and I asked every single one of them. I said, when order to come after the guns, none of them said, nope, we won't. And that's the attitude of the military. So I really think Washington don't really realize the ground has severely shifted underneath their feet. It's becoming quicksand.
Well, they're obviously a little isolated there. They're surrounded by staffers who are basically glorified yes people. They don't want to actually tell the higher-ups what's really going on, because they don't want to risk losing their cushy job. And, you know, Rivero's law of mid-management is middle management is always trying to make sure they're the only ones who know how bad things are, because they don't want their subordinates to give up or their superiors to crack down on them. And if you're sitting on more than 3 layers of middle management, you're effectively deaf, dumb, and blind to what's really going on in the world. And, of course, the federal government has hundreds of layers of mid-management. And so, as a matter of fact, we have seen from many of the statements coming out of Washington, D.C., they really don't understand how the public opinion has shifted. And when the pollsters start lying to make things look good, that was their last line of communication. Okay, George?
Well, like I say, I'm studying the Nat Turner Rebellion, if everybody ever knows about that. You know, it's about the slave. And I really think this is going to be a Nat Turner rebellion on a large scale.
Well, again... Okay, no, I understand what you're saying, but again, what I really see as the best possible outcome is for everybody to stay calm, to simply continue to stand up with the Occupy movement or without and shout to the world, we are no longer the wallet of last resort for Wall Street's crimes and corruptions. It's not even a case anymore of whether we choose to be that walking wallet or not. We don't have it anymore. And foreign investors will start pulling their money out of the system. They've already have. Foreign investment in the U.S. is down 1/3 over last year, and that'll bring the whole system down like the former Soviet Union. There'll be very little bloodshed, and then we pick up the pieces, we learn from our mistakes, and we start forming a new nation. Rule number 1, no private central banks. Rule number 2, no private central banks. Rule number 3, no private central banks, and we'll sort of work out the rest of the problems after that.
Will become obsolete.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I say private central banks will become obsolete.
Private central banks ought to be forbidden under pain of death. Every nation with a private central bank has been brought to the edge of ruin. We've had 3 of them in the United States. All 3 have brought the nation to the edge of collapse. They do not work for the nation. They do not work for the community. They do not work for the people. They must be banned on pain of death.
That's correct. Well,
we actually did that under the Coinage Act of the first Coinage Act, 1779, I think it was. Everything the Federal Reserve System is doing was a death penalty offense, and we should have clung to that wisdom. The Founding Fathers understood how private central banks are the enemy of ordinary people. We fought a revolution to be free of one, only to have a corrupted Congress and a corrupted president sell us right back into the slavery of the same scam.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Mike.
All right, you got it there. Now, new development. Mexico is now demanding a full and complete audit and purity testing of their gold holdings at the Bank of England. And apparently it's prompted a bit of a debate between the government of Mexico and the Bank of Mexico. And the Bank of Mexico is another privately owned central bank that is siding and buddy-buddy with all the other private central banks and is saying, we don't need to audit the gold. We're sure it's... The Bank of England would never lie to us. And apparently the Mexican government has put its foot down and say, we want to know. We need to know. We have a right to know the physical wholeness and compliance and terms and conditions in dealing with the asset. So Mexico is now wanting to audit their gold, which means we may be at war with Mexico again in the very, very near future here. As we continue to look into that whole foreclosure gate situation, banks are finding more wrongful foreclosures against military veterans. These are the people who are putting their lives on the line to fight these wars for the bankers, and they get back home and the bankers are still screwing them. Just amazing here. All right, got another caller on the line, Scott in Virginia. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Listen, I've got a crazy idea on how to fix this whole mess. Get rid of the Federal Reserve, get rid of the debt, and be able to bring agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats to do it, and also the folks that own our debt overseas. And here's my idea. It's crazy, but here it is. We go ahead and make a deal, sign a treaty with the Indians, acknowledging that all the land in the continental United States was stolen, and we are returning it in return for not being held accountable for the theft and dealing in stolen property, because all our titles are based on stolen property.
Yes.
And in return, the agreement is the Indians would agree to sell us back the land for 2% and give us 10 years to do it. Now, there's only about 5 million Native American Indians in the country. And when we took the land from it, the land wasn't worth all that much. So it's a great deal for them. Most Americans are over their heads in their mortgages, so 2% of their $200,000 home is $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
And they own their home outright. Plus, because we're getting rid of the United States corporation, it's bankrupt. We basically turned it over to the Indians, and they're not going to honor any of the loans because it's all criminal fraud. So all those loans were made on stolen property.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, here's how I'm going to get the Republicans to go for this.
Oh, I want to hear this part.
Okay. One, the Federal Reserve is gone. Day one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the Libertarians are going to be happy. Now, we're not going to have any cash. I mean, as soon as this gets announced, the dollar is going to be worthless.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So we're going to go back to the medium of exchange that we had before we had a big central federal government and the Federal Reserve. And that is, we're going to go back to dealing with the Indians, paying them back with booze, guns, and dead animal skins. Now, first of all, every Republican...
I'm sorry, I got to catch off here because we're into a commercial break. I have a couple of comments on this when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And following upon Scott's suggestion, which is a little convoluted, and it has some practical limitations. Back during the Clinton administration, President Clinton signed United States Public Law 103-150, in which the United States admitted illegally stealing Hawaii from the Hawaiians during the annexation. But they didn't give it back. And the state of Hawaii's court system simply said that we will not recognize any land titles from before the theft. And so even if the United States were to apologize to the Native Americans for stealing their lands, they're not going to give it back. Now, your first idea is absolutely the correct one. The Federal Reserve has to be gotten rid of. But anybody who thinks the federal government is going to do it is dreaming, because it was the federal government that enslaved us to that banking system and have profited handsomely ever since via very generous campaign donations. We talk about how much money Israel pours onto our various Congress critters. It's nothing compared to what they're getting from Wall Street, which is why Congress can be counted on to continue to drive you into grinding poverty to serve the bankers. The system's going to have to come down all together, all at the same time, all by itself, which does seem to be looming on the horizon. And we, rather than preparing to fight armed combat in the streets, should be preparing to take care of ourselves and our family through a period where this large interlocked corporate food delivery system isn't working any longer, when the supply chains are breaking down. So the simple solution is the best one, and it's the one that the Founding Fathers did back in 1776. Kick out the private central bank, kick out the government that serves it, and start all over fresh and say, no private central bank. Government will create the currency and spend it in circulation to buy what the government needs. It'll flow through commerce, serving the public without accruing interest to a private banker, and then be taxed back at the end of the cycle to balance the books. That's a system that works for the people and the government, not the bankers. The system we have now, where the government goes to a private bank to borrow money, which is just created out of thin air, and then pays interest on it, is absurd. It is enslavement to those bankers. If the government can print up a $1 Treasury bond, it can print up a $1 note. And the difference between them is the bond serves the bankers and the note serves the people. This government will never, ever stand up to the Federal Reserve. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And getting back to the world of bankers, there's a scandal growing over at NatWest. Apparently, this 69-year-old woman went into NatWest, where she had a safety deposit box in which she had a lot of family heirlooms that she wanted to give as gifts to one of her descendants who was getting married. 20,000 pounds of jewelry and heirlooms, her father's watch, all kinds of things. And NatWest couldn't find the box. This woman had the box number and the keys, and they said, just can't find it, sorry. Went missing. We feel really bad about that. They've been looking for it for 6 months, still cannot find it. And they're saying, well, you know, tell us what it was worth, we'll discuss compensation. And she says, I don't want the money. The money is worthless. These are sentimentally important valuables. And NatWest is just doing this big shrug. Well, unless there's signs of dynamite through the wall of that bank, obviously somebody working for the bank has been going through those boxes, helping themselves to goodies. And this 69-year-old woman was saying, how can you trust a bank that loses something like this? Well, you shouldn't be trusting the banks anyway. Got another caller on the line. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, we're just responding to the caller, a couple callers ago or whatever, talking about how to get rid of the Federal Reserve, and your point that this government will never do it, which you know, that's the power that Obama retains. You know, if he can kill anyone in the world or make them disappear, he can certainly arrest these bankers. But as you said, they will never do that, which means that this has to be a violent, inevitably it will become to violence. That's my first point. My second point is I almost vomited when I'm reading about Israel, which is trying to declare itself after all these years of avoiding being an ally of ours, because that would require some sort of reciprocity from them, that they'd have to go to war when we went to war, and they've never wanted that.
No.
Knowing they could, you know, but how they want to secure their money without any kind of sequestering or budgetary fights. And Mike, I've got a 10-year-old daughter who is in a public school, and it's a really good public school in L.A. It's got the highest scores in the city of L.A., but they don't have a librarian. I mean, the parents have to pay for the librarian. They don't have a nurse. They have a janitor. 3 days a week they have a janitor. And yet these guys, these Israel First or Fifth columnists, want us to not only surrender the lives of our children and their futures and their educations and so on, so they can have their Jews-only roads, Jews-only laws, now Jews-only buses, Jews-only towns, in pursuit of their apartheid dream of Jewish exceptionalism and supremacy and so on. And it just makes me ill. And then I heard, and I don't know when you're going to get into it, but I really want to hear you talk about that shekel dollar thing.
Yes.
So that's my comment. It was just too much. I had to say something, and there you go.
Well, people are getting angry. I'm not surprised to hear you talk about that. Again, I would prefer a nonviolent collapse of the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government to the violence option. Violence is going to work for the government. They're obviously preparing to deal with a violent American uprising. They may even try and trigger one deliberately because they know how to deal with that. What they cannot deal with, what they have not been able to deal with, is 300 million Americans standing up and shouting to the world, we will no longer pay for the crimes and corruptions. We're out of money. Deal with it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Apparently, political commentators are suggesting Mitt Romney be appointed to Detroit's position of emergency financial manager. State of Michigan's coming in and just taking over Detroit, try and sort out that huge mess, most of which is related to all the pension defunding from the mortgage-backed security fraud, and they want to put Mitt Romney in charge of it. Haven't those poor people in Detroit suffered enough? Did you have to do this to them? Back to the phones. Kit in San Diego. Aloha, Kit. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Great. Tell me if you think this would work. If we were to kill the Federal Reserve by essentially performing Harry Carry in the general public, that is, if anybody has any money saved in any of the big six banks, the Chase, the HSBC, the Wells Fargo, everybody pulled their money out of there, those banks would have no money to lend to the federal government via the Federal Reserve, and then it would all collapse.
Well, unfortunately, you don't understand the nature of the Federal Reserve. They just create the money. When the U.S. government prints up a Treasury bond, which is a promise to tax you in the future to make good on the bond, they send it over to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve just prints up money and sends it back over. And the idea that banks are dependent on the deposits of ordinary people, that ended in 1913. And so it sounds like a really good idea, and common sense advice right now is you should only have in the bank enough money to cover your obligations, your outstanding checks, and you should keep the rest under your own control, because when the banks lock up, you're not going to be able to get at your money.
Well, that's exactly what I do. I only keep enough in there for bills, but if we all just pull our money out and crash the banks, would that not help?
No, it won't crash the bank. It would have prior to the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. But all the banks would simply do is turn around to the Federal Reserve and say, we're short cash for our reserve limits, loan us a little bit more, and the Federal Reserve will just create it. The only thing that will bring it down is if the dollar is dropped as the international currency, which a lot of countries want to do, and those that are not afraid of U.S. invasion are doing. And, of course, if Europe falls apart, that credit default swap firestorm on Wall Street will bring that whole system down. But it's all going to have to come down together. And again, what I think would be the best outcome for the United States of America and for the rest of the world is for the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve to collapse the way the former Soviet Union did. Minimum of bloodshed, a few months of confusion that you're going to have to get through, and we form a new government that is founded basically on the same principles that it was 230-odd years ago. And again, rule number one, no private central banking. We fought a revolution to be free of that. We need to make sure that the new government understands anybody proposing a private central bank be given the money creation authority, gets hanged, drawn, quartered, burned, and the ashes peed on by a rabid dog.
All right. I got it, Mike. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Now, moving on. Send in the drones. Anyway, drones are appearing everywhere now. They're all over the place. They hover over Hollywood film sets to make sure that people aren't making movies the government doesn't approve of. They're flying over professional sports events. Tracking wildfires in Colorado, you really can't argue with that. Survey Kansas farm crops, vineyards, all of that stuff. They also locate marijuana fields, spot illegal immigrants breaching U.S. borders, not that they're stopped. There are now tens of thousands of domestic drones in the U.S. skies, and many of them are flouting the tight federal restrictions on drone use that require even the police and the military to get special permits. It's very crowded up there. Anybody who's ever gone out for pilot's training understands that learning to physically control the aircraft is fairly easy. It's the rules about where you can go that take the most scholarship, because otherwise you start running into each other. And there have already been several near misses where drones are wandering into places they ought not to and causing accidents. Now, the drones today are operating in the same mindset as the barnstormers of the post-World War I years, where everybody was getting into airplanes. You could have an airplane out back on your farm and take off and fly where you wanted to go. And when the density of aircraft in the air started getting too high, that's when the government stepped in and said, we're going to have air routes, literally highways in the sky. Everybody has to follow the rules so that we're not colliding with each other. But the drones are being flown as if they're barnstormers. I feel like going over here. I feel like going over there. They're basically all operating on VFR, visual flight rules, which is okay if you're in an area where everybody's on VFR, but most big cities no longer are. Most big cities, especially if they have an airport, they're under a terminal control area where everybody's got to be following the rules, and the drones are not. And it's only a matter of time before there's an accident. Now, you know that here on this show we have talked about the importance of people engaged in First Amendment protected speech and gathering activities need to arm themselves with cameras to record the police if the police are violating your civil rights. And the police attitude tends to be, you can't record us, there are laws against us. We know the courts have ruled repeatedly. The American people have a First Amendment right to photograph and video police in public. If the police are in public, they have no expectation of privacy. Well, apparently now the police are going to fight back because they can't get rid of all the little secret cameras that people have. The police are now starting to wear video cameras on their sunglasses. So it's going to be a war between video when it gets to the court. Of course, if it's anything like the video that's being taken by their police cars, if it shows the police doing something embarrassing, it'll somehow get lost in the warehouse. But it's now an escalation of video cameras. And it's not a bad thing if you are engaged in First Amendment protected activity and the police are violating your civil rights. But it will also give lawyers who are defending protesters against police harassment something else to subpoena. All right, we think the police were behaving badly. We want the video from their glasses. Now, a long time ago, there was a guy named Paul Scott, was a syndicated columnist. And he was so paranoid about CIA wiretapping, he'd often go to his friends' and neighbors' houses to make important phone calls. And his son, Jim Scott, sort of assumed his dad was nuts. Now, 45 years later, when the CIA declassified a trove of documents called the Family Jewels, it revealed that, yes, in fact, the CIA had been wiretapping this columnist under Project Mockingbird. Now, Project Mockingbird is the CIA's operation to control the corporate media. And it came into being right after World War II, in which the CIA made sure that the top managers of every corporate media outlet in America were CIA assets. in order to make sure that you, the American people, only got the news and information that would lead you to conclude of your own free will exactly what the government wanted you to be thinking. And so it's another confirmation. This has been going on all along. 45 years ago this was taking place. This is not new to have the government watching everything that you're doing if you're in the media. I ran into these bozos myself at CBS Television City. All right, another phone call. Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Kyle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I wanted to take a step back and continue on what people were talking about as solutions to every problem that we face.
Yes.
And in my opinion, there is only one true viable solution, and that is either national or just global non-compliance. If they tell you you have to pay, you have to buy health care, or you have to turn in your guns, or you can't have an assault rifle, or your clips can't be this long, everybody just needs to say, no, I'm afraid not. I'm a human being. I have certain rights, and no matter what you put on a piece of paper or what you cast a vote in, it doesn't change what I, as a human being, am entitled to.
Well, non-compliance is already spreading. We're seeing, you know, there's a massive tax non-compliance in this country, certainly a massive tax non-compliance over in Europe. The governments aren't admitting to it because it might give these still obedient sheeple bad ideas. People are just foregoing filling out required paperwork on various government operations. They're just fed up with it. And so it's already starting. But ultimately what it's going to take to bring down this whole system is for the people of the world to stand up and say, just like they're doing in Greece right now and in Italy, we are not the wallet of last resort when this Ponzi scheme bank starts to fail. And everybody's standing up and saying exactly the same thing at the same time. And I think the one good aspect of globalism that we're seeing is the possibility that all of these private central banks will come crashing down at the same time, which means there won't be any one remaining nation with a private central bank to start this process of recolonizing the world by the bankers all over again.
We need to have a mentality of an injustice to one of us is truly an injustice to all of us.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
And if it can happen to such and such in some town or state or country, then it can just as easily be you.
Okay, we got to let you go. Coming up on a commercial break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're getting an interesting story coming out of San Francisco. Apparently, police in an unmarked police car were at the scene of a crime. They left their car. They went in to do whatever it is they were going to do, grab some donuts. We don't know. Unidentified suspects broke the window of the unmarked police car and stole the police officer's AR-15 assault rifle. And this is a reminder of why registration and background checks are not going to keep the guns out of the hands of the criminals. They'll just help themselves. Break into a gun store, break into the police, get them from Fast and Furious. Now then. Big brouhaha. The Vatican's getting ready to hold conclave. The cardinals are already there in the pre-conclave negotiations, which, I don't know, maybe it's a wrestling tournament. They pick the next pope by best 3 falls out of 5 or something. Or dartboard or something like that. I don't really know. Meanwhile, over in Baltimore, they've arrested a church deacon for child porn. And apparently he's been doing this for a long time. He's 67 years old. And they found pictures of sexually explicit, little kids in sexually explicit poses. And this guy was getting off on them. And apparently the imaginary playmate in the sky didn't tap him on the shoulder and say, you know, you really ought not to do that. Now, I'm not a prude. And I'm not trying to hold my life up as an example for anybody to follow, because you'd be in big trouble if you did. And whatever consenting adults of any gender and number, plus household appliances and livestock, want to do in their bedrooms, I don't have a problem with. As Woody Allen used to say, sex between 2 people is a beautiful thing, but between 5 is really dynamite. But when children are being involved, I have some pretty primal instincts that kick in. And I have to draw the line and say this is absolutely unacceptable, and I will continue to call it out time and time again. Little postscript to the story. This deacon was reported to the police by Verizon because he was apparently storing his child porn on the cloud. And Verizon turned him in. Which makes it understandable why we should be concerned about using the cloud. Obviously, it's not secure. Obviously, your private images, videos, whatever, are available for inspection. And either it's being searched by some covert government program to look for incriminating information, or it's just people running the cloud or just paging through directories looking for anything interesting. Oh, here's some naked people. Oh, they're kids. Let's rat the guy out. Which, I have to side with them doing that. But it underscores the fact that if you're using the cloud, expect no privacy at all. Now, I want to talk about this issue about unlocking your phone. As of late January, it became illegal for cell phone users to unlock their phones, either to put on unauthorized software or to transfer over to a different carrier. And apparently, the penalty for unlocking your phone is now 5 years in jail. I know murderers who've gotten less time than that. And if you really think about it, it's absurd. It's like buying a TV set that has Netflix built into it, and many of them do, and then being told by Netflix you may not sign up for any alternative cable provider. That's how absurd this idea is. On the case of my iPhone, I wanted to be able to simply have the phone not ring when unidentified callers came in. And there is no application for that. There's no way to do that coming from Apple. So you have to jailbreak the phone in order to put in a third-party app that simply sends blocked and unidentified calls to voicemail. And now it's illegal to do that. To go out and get something you want for your phone that Apple has decided, no, you can't have this. You will take your blocked and unidentified phone calls. That's just one example. A lot of other utilities I wanted. I paid for it. I should be able to do whatever I want with it, and if I screw it up or brick it, that's my own fault. And I'll accept the responsibility for that, because with freedom comes responsibility. Now, the good news is, apparently there was a petition over at the White House petition website that got something like 114,000 signatures. And apparently the Obama administration has responded to this petition, unlike all the ones for secession, and said they are going to go back and look at reversing this ban on cell phone unlocking. Wish they'd paid that much attention to the secession one or the Money to Israel petition. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as we mentioned, the Vatican's getting ready to start the conclave, and Dan Brown's already taking notes for his next book here. And poor Pope Benny, he's just having a rough time trying to quit. First of all, you had that lightning strike on the Dome of St. Peter's. And apparently they just had a small earthquake under Castel Gandolfo, which is his retirement home. So maybe the big guy in the sky isn't all happy about this quitting thing. Anyway, I got a very nice email regarding my Department of Homeland Security monitored word of the day, which I run as kind of a joke. And if you look at the list of the words that are on that list, most of them are a joke as well. But apparently that is now coming down to the corporate level, because corporate mail systems now have scan by trigger word to make it easier for management to make sure that you're not using your business email systems for something they don't approve of. Now, again, to my listeners, I would prefer it greatly if you listened to my show, my podcast, and read my website from the privacy of your own home. And you shouldn't be tuning in during business hours. But on the other hand, it is a tremendous invasion of privacy for managers to be looking into your email. And I certainly wouldn't be comfortable doing it. But apparently it's now become the norm that you be spied on, not only by your government, but by your employer. So definitely, if you're sending out resumes, do it from home. Because if they find out you're looking for a new job, you will be gone. And they will not give you a good reference if anybody calls here. A lot of people talking about the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It's supposed to be an anti-hacking law, but it's so broadly written that it could technically criminalize lying about your age on Facebook or lying about your appearance on Craigslist, letting a friend log in to your Pandora account, or even sending a sexy message on eHarmony. It's just such a broad net. And this is normal human behavior on these systems here. And it's also a reminder of why all this constant scrutiny of everything that you do online is not a good source for intelligence. Facebook is being propped up because the intelligence community of the United States seems to feel that they can get something useful data mining from it. Like real, genuine terrorists, if there are any, opposed to these fakes like Adam Perlman, real terrorists aren't going to be posting to Facebook, yes, I'm going to go down and I tried to blow up a school bus and I burned my lips on the exhaust pipe. People lie online to the point where any database created off of data mining Facebook or Twitter or Craigslist is going to be useless. It's going to be completely unreliable. Anyway, again, I think a lot of this is just a giant bluff by the government. We're watching everything you do. We're listening to everything you do. Don't say anything we don't approve of. Too late. Now, over in Switzerland, and I think this is just funny as all heck, digital rights management has reached such ridiculous degree that people are starting to poke fun at it. A group of 8 Swiss design students built something they called the DRM chair. And it was their entry in the Deconstruction, which is a global design competition. And the concept is each time someone sits down in this DRM chair, the chair senses their weight, and upon the 8th sitting, a mechanism is triggered that melts the chair's joints. So it collapses. I think my wife had one of those. We got it from Office Depot a little over a year ago, and about a month ago the back just fell off. Anyway. People are very, speaking of Facebook, and by the way, they're announcing a new policy where they're going to deliver more graphic content on Facebook for advertisers. Videos, animations, whatever. But apparently, a week ago, Facebook Director of Product Blake Ross announced he's leaving the company. And he basically said he is leaving the company because a Forbes writer had asked his son's best friend if Facebook was still cool with the youth market, and the friend said no. And a quick survey among the young people showed that young people are turning away from Facebook. It's stopped being this community sharing site, and it's gone commercial with advertising, just like any other corporate media website. And they're turning away from it. And so Blake Ross is saying the long-term viability of the company is now seriously in doubt. Now, over at Press TV, getting an interesting story. Apparently, Lebanese Asia News website it has reviewed a documentary made by a Syrian media activist, Kedar Awaraki, which shows confessions by captured intelligence agents showing that France and Turkey engaged in a plot to assassinate Assad. And Syrian security confirms they have recently defused assassination attempts against Assad and the Syrian foreign minister Walid al-Muallim. So they're getting serious in there. They want Syria taken out. They need to get onto the war with Iran here. Meanwhile, another interesting story, this out of one of the Russian websites. U.S. Army commandos are already training the so-called Syrian rebels in Jordan and inside Syria itself. Apparently, U.S. armed commandos are already in Syria carrying out reconnaissance operations, possibly sabotage. So the United States already has boots on the ground inside Syria. And what is the justification? Oh, we're helping the Syrian people throw off an evil tyrant and a dictator. I'm trying to do that for over 2 years. If the Syrian people wanted Assad gone, he would have been gone as fast as Mubarak was. Meanwhile, Israel is in high dudgeon regarding Iran, not only at the AIPAC conference, but Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak, who's now stepping down from his job, but a farewell shot. He's warning Iran again. Israel will not allow Iranian leaders to develop a nuclear weapon. Well, again, it's really none of his business. Ehud Barak was the defense minister of Israel, not of Iran. And it is just another sign of Israel's arrogance that they go around the world saying, we will tell you what you are allowed and not allowed to do. And of course, behind it all is the fact that nobody has ever found any evidence Iran is developing nuclear weapons, although they would be perfectly justified in doing so, considering what happened to Iraq. That's the lesson of Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen and Somalia. The U.S. attacks and invades countries that do not have nuclear arms as a deterrent. And they're still out there screaming nuclear arms in Iran. When was the last time Iran launched a war of aggression against another country? It's been over 200 years. Israel has nuclear weapons. They won't sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They won't allow IAEA inspections. They got caught trying to sell one to South Africa, which means they're probably out there selling them everywhere else. And of course, John Kerry is out there screaming time is running out for a diplomatic solution on Iran. There is no Iranian nuclear problem. Everything Iran is doing is authorized by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which both the United States and Iran have signed. It is the United States that is in violation of that treaty. First of all, by ignoring Article 4, which commits the United States to help Iran build peaceful nuclear facilities, which is a really good way to make sure there is no clandestine bomb factory underneath like the one the Israelis have at Dimona. And secondly, by using the threat of military force to coerce Iran into surrendering their rights under that treaty. There is no Iranian nuclear threat. The threat is Iran's oil sold for currencies other than the dollar. And Iran as a political uniting force in the Mideast, which Israel cannot accept. Kerry's screaming about nukes is a replay of the same old, tired, faded lie used to justify the invasion of Iraq for precisely the same motives. Iraq's oil sold only for dollars, and a major political uniting force smashed to pieces to please Israel. Going to go to the phones here. Keith in Montana. Aloha, Keith. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Mike. We had 4 inches of new snow this morning.
Ah, got to make snowman.
Yeah.
And then give them a sign that says fight global warming.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I got another video today from Syria. It shows these Americans over there fighting.
Mm-hmm.
The last one, you could clearly tell they had Turkish bank bags and stuff like that stuffed in a glove box. But those same Americans over there fighting, now today was released that they're dead now.
Okay, well, you take that risk when you go over there.
That's right. I don't know if these guys are mercenaries or what, but I wanted to say something else, too, about this thing with Iran. Whenever they talk about Iran, they never say anything about how the United States gave Iran their nuclear program in the Atoms for Peace program. They never say that.
Well, back then, the Shah was in power, and the Shah was an obedient serf to the U.S. government. And back when the Shah was in power, they ran ads in the corporate media saying, you know, Iran is going nuclear. They're building a power structure. They see the future. And it was all considered a good thing that the Shah of Iran was going into the nuclear power. The problem is after the 1979 revolution and the Iranian people setting up a government they wanted, that's when it became a real big issue. But Iran is still Iran, and the treaty is still binding.
Right. Well, I thought it was kind of funny that the CIA was the same year that they got their Atoms for Peace program, was the same year that the CIA went in there. And also, I wanted to thank you for putting up Len Mid's article on Iran there.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's it. Have a good day. I hope the wife and everyone's fine, and I'll tell Milo you said hi.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Thank you for the phone call.
Bye.
All righty. NATO has now apologized for killing 2 Afghan boys who are 11 and 12 years old who were collecting firewood, and they were killed by a NATO helicopter. Wasn't even a drone strike where they could say, oh, well, the TV picture was fuzzy. NATO crew in a helicopter just shot these 2 kids. Kids collecting firewood. And NATO apologizes, as they always do when they kill children and innocents, but they go on doing it. We're really sorry we killed your kids. We feel really bad. Anyway, now that Argentina has come to an agreement with Iran to reinvestigate the 1994 bombing of a Buenos Aires Jewish center, the rhetoric is cranking up. Hector Timmerman, the foreign minister of Argentina, has outright come out and accused Israel of providing the munitions used in that bombing. Now remember, when it happened, it was classic false flag. Jewish center gets blown up. Oh, it's Iran. Iran did it. Bad Iran. Gotta blame Iran. And we know at this point in history, Israel survives on the false flag attack. Israel by itself can't fight its own wars. They're a little tiny country, about half the size of New Jersey, and they don't like to fight their own wars. They want other people to do it, and they trick them into it. By way of deception, thou shalt do war. We were talking the other day, Viktor Ostrovsky, former Mossad, now he's an artist, and he wrote a book, By Way of Deception, where he just leaked all of this stuff out there. And some of it we already knew, like the Lavon affair over in Egypt, and the attack on the USS Liberty, which had the ship sunk, was to be blamed on Egypt to get the U.S. into the war against Egypt on Israel's behalf. And Viktor Ostrovsky basically blew the whistle that Israeli operatives smuggled a radio transmitter into Libya and started broadcasting fake messages on frequencies they knew the United States was monitoring about how Muammar Gaddafi was sending out legions of terrorists to rain destruction down on the great Satan. And Reagan fell for it, or he pretended to fall for it, and they bombed Libya. They missed Gaddafi. They killed his adopted daughter, 5-year-old. And this is how Israel has done all that it's done for its entire existence. They trick other people into fighting their wars for them. Wasn't all that long ago, British intelligence revealed that Israel set up the hijacking that led to the raid on Entebbe to make the Palestinians look bad and the Israelis look heroic. And Shin Bet, which had infiltrated these Palestinian groups, put them up to it. It's like we see here in the United States with the FBI wandering around setting up all these losers to be arrested for terrorism. And we all know that's what they're doing. And now we know that's what Israel's been doing. Again, back to the Lavon affair. Israeli agents were bombing British and American assets in Egypt and leaving evidence to frame the Egyptians. Until one of the bombs detonated prematurely and they caught the Israeli agent. At which point Israel started screaming, "It's an anti-Semitic plot! It's just the Hitler lovers are lying about us yet again!" And ultimately, of course, Israel was forced to admit, yeah, it was our guy, we're sorry. Same thing with Jonathan Pollard when he confessed to stealing America's nuclear secrets and selling them to Israel. And Israel screamed, "It's an anti-Semitic plot." And then eventually they had to say, "Yeah, he was ours. He was working for us. You caught us." Anyway. Now, over the weekend, and I'm going to have to take this into the next segment because we're coming up on a commercial break. But over the weekend, Israel raised the stakes on the Holocaust myth. Because people have been turning away from it, they're tired of it, they're burned out of it, and they don't want to hear about it any longer. So Israel decided they were going to juice it up a little bit. And they said it wasn't 6 million, it was 20 million. More about that when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And end of last week, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial issued a report they had sponsored, paid for, which came out and said there were far more Nazi ghettos and camps. And over at the Huffington Post, their headline read, "Numbers are unbelievable." Yes, they are. And what's going on here is we have been getting Holocaust, Nazi, Hitler saturation on the corporate media, and people are just tuning out. Most of the people alive today hadn't been born when all this stuff was going on. And they're tired of it just constantly being waved in their face. So if at first you don't succeed, lie again. And they decided they were going to improve the shock value by saying, "Oh, it was far worse than you were told. 42,500 ghettos and camps." And what they're basically doing is the Holocaust has now become a fish story. Every time you tell it, the fish gets a little bigger. "That fish was so bad, bit the rear of my boat off." So now, according to this report from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial that is being carried as straight news by the corporate media without question, between 15 and 20 million Jews were the victims of the Nazis. Now, little dose of reality, which is why you come here. The number of Jews living in Nazi-occupied Europe was 2.6 million. There were just 600,000 in Germany itself. It was in the newspapers of the time. Not the ads waving 6 million, 6 million, 6 million, which go back to even to 1902, we've now found. The number of Jews living in Russia during World War II, 2.1 million. Put together, that's just 4.7 million Jews in all of Nazi-occupied Europe and Russia. The numbers do not line up. And do you really think it took all this time to find these additional tens of thousands of camps? Funny, they didn't leave any foundations. It's just a reapplication of the big lie principle. And if you actually have the courage to put down the propaganda and actually read Mein Kampf, Hitler was not advocating the use of the big lie, he was warning against it. And he basically said the bigger the lie you're being told, the more likely people will believe it because of the shock value. And so that's what they're trying. They're not getting traction with the old story of the Holocaust. They're waving it around to build sympathy for Israel ahead of Israel's attack on Iran, which will drag the U.S. into it, into possible war with Russia. So they're going to try and get it out there with more shock. It wasn't 6 million, it was 20 million. I'm going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we mentioned this earlier in the show, but I want to go into it in a little more depth. Israel has had 2 destroyed currencies internally because of bad management. And because of that, Israel is not able to sell bonds in shekels. Nobody will buy them because they got burned on that before. So back at the turn of the 21st century, Israel came up with this scheme to sell U.S. bonds to Americans. Israel issues bonds in America payable in dollars, not shekels. The problem is the program was a success. All of Israel's supporters in the United States were buying these Israel bonds payable in dollars. And Israel now owes to those people who bought those bonds more dollars than it can repay, because Israel cannot print U.S. dollars. They can only print shekels. What is Israel's solution? They're selling more of the dollar bonds and use the proceeds from the new bonds to pay off the old bonds. It's another Ponzi scheme. And when it gets ready to collapse, what do you think Israel will do to get those dollars to pay off those dollar bonds? They'll come to the U.S. Congress and say, oh, you must give us more dollars from the American people so we can pay off those bonds we sold to the American people. No other country on earth is issuing bonds payable in U.S. dollars other than Israel and the United States. Did our government authorize this? Did the Federal Reserve authorize this? It's a scandal either way. If Israel did this without permission, or if they were given permission, it's still a negative here. Now, one of our callers earlier in the show commented on this, and I want to get into this. Israeli elections were held almost 2 months ago. They still cannot form a new government, despite the convenient crisis in the West Bank and in Gaza because of that Palestinian dissident who was tortured to death. But they're moving ahead quite efficiently on their plan to have segregated bus lines. Certain buses for Jews only, and other buses for Palestinians only, because the Jews don't want to share a bus with the Palestinians. Now, if you have a long memory, and you've been around on this planet as long as I have, you'll remember when we had segregated public transport in the United States of America. And it wasn't even as bad as Israel. The idea of the bus is the blacks rode in the rear of the bus and the whites rode up front, until Rosa Parks came along. And so Israel is again demonstrating to the world they are a racist apartheid nation. And right now in Washington, D.C., your Congress is pledging eternal, undying financial support to this racist apartheid government in Israel. For those of our audience who are pigmentally blessed, I guess is a good word for it, are you not insulted that after the tremendous victory for civil rights in the United States of America, your government is sending your tax money to a racist apartheid regime? You ought to be. You ought to be very, very angry. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, down in Florida at Cypress Lake High School, there was an incident on a school bus where a student pulled out a .22 caliber revolver and threatened another student. A third student, 16-year-old, grabbed the gun and wrestled it away from the potential shooter. The school administration saying that because he was involved in a violent incident involving a firearm has suspended him for 3 days. Are these school administrators on SSRIs? I mean, have they not seen all of those Department of Homeland Security videos saying if you're confronted with a shooter, stab him with scissors or throw a book at him? And here you have a heroic 16-year-old kid intervened to stop a potential shooting, and they're punishing him. What kind of a message is that sending to the kids in the school? Don't do anything. Don't try and help. Just stand there and be shot because we need more dead students to push the anti-gun agenda. That kid deserves a medal. And the school suspended him for 3 days. I think that school administration needs to be fired. Just, you don't understand this stuff when it happens. You have a 16-year-old kid acting responsibly, thwarting a potential shooting, and he's treated exactly the same way as if he's the shooter himself. Boy, I hope somebody doesn't point a gun at the principal of that school, because if he's expecting anybody around him to intervene, it's not going to happen. It's like that story we saw earlier today about how this woman in a retirement home collapsed in the dining room. The attendants called 911. The 911 operator said, "You've got to administer CPR." And the staff at this nursing home said, "We can't do it. Our policy won't allow us to do it." And the 911 operator is saying, "Find somebody. Get somebody from off the street." And the woman died. And the nursing home said, "Our policy is, if somebody suffers an emergency, we will call the first responders and wait with the afflicted until they get there." And we know the average wait time for a 911 call in this country is about 19 minutes. We had that story the other day where somebody was having a heart attack and his family calls 911. Ambulance took 45 minutes to get there, during which the patient died. Ambulance company still sent him a bill. Absolutely absurd. Going to take a phone call here. Tate in Michigan. Aloha, Tate. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I wanted to backtrack, if you don't mind, for a moment about Kerry's visit to Egypt. And it really shows who he was there working for, because his main purpose of being there was to close a deal for the IMF for $4.3 billion and set terms that they're comfortable with to get a more infusion of their zombie economy. And it
get him back on the hook to the private central bankers. That's his mission.
Exactly. So we're going to see what Morsi's all about if he signs this deal, which is looking like he's going to. And, again, he's just working for the West. And it's so frustrating, because when are we going to have somebody that actually goes over and trying to create peace and negotiate deals to sell products? Instead, it's just work for the bankers, enslave us, and put us on the hook for the debt that they're creating for us.
Well, anybody who stands up to the bankers gets shot at, and I don't know that Morsi's necessarily working for the West, or the West wouldn't be trying so hard to undermine him. But I think Morsi was basically told, unless you agree to this IMF deal and come on board the global banking cartel, Egypt will find its export markets drying up. And Morsi decided he really couldn't afford that at this particular time. So I think that's really the pressure that's brought to bear. Either be part of the global banking cartel or get used to surviving within your own borders and being invaded.
It seems like the whole world's on fire, and it's all being fanned by green paper and monopoly money, and it's really frustrating.
That's exactly what it is. All wars are banker wars. All wars are banker wars. I should reprise that article up to the top of my webpage. Anything else?
I've been posting it. I love it. I don't have much else to say, but keep it up. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, that article went viral, and especially the movie that was made from it. All right, a little kind of a personal plug here. We just completed another video for one of Claire's pieces of music. It was called Lord Help Me Make This World a Better Place. And it's basically a celebration of the people here on the island of Oahu who are trying to feed the food insecure, the hungry. Let's just call them the hungry. I'm tired of these euphemisms. These are people who are on food stamps. The food stamp money only lasts to the third week. We're trying to get some additional support there. And so we just took a video and we put this piece of music on there. And I mentioned that because if you go to that video, which is on the front page of What Really Happened, we're putting out a call for listener involvement in the next video, because we just finished recording the music to another song Claire wrote called I Stand Amazed, which is a celebration of marriages that last and are wonderful, which I'm very fortunate to be in such a marriage. And we always hear in the corporate media about this divorce and that divorce and how bad it is, and maybe it's time to look at the other side. There are some marriages that work and are incredibly wonderful and to be in. And so what I would like, because I don't want to do a video that's just 5 minutes of me smiling, which I know you're not going to want to watch, we're asking our readers and our listeners, if you are in a long-duration marriage that you think is wonderful, just email me a photo or a video of you and your significant other in a moment of shared happiness, and we will use them to make this upcoming video, and you can send them to my website, wrh@whatreallyhappened.com, and put "I stand amazed" in the subject line so I will spot it and make sure that you're brought in and be part of Claire's new video. So thanks an awful lot for that. Now, getting back to Tate's phone call about making deals, why isn't that happening? Well, Russia's doing that. Russia's going all over the globe. They're making deals while the United States is making war. And Russia is now showing off their new Superjet 100 to China. They're now carrying out commercial flights from the Russian city of Yakutsk to the Chinese city of Harbin. And the Chinese are very impressed with this airplane. It's very easy to recognize. It's the plane that doesn't have smoke and fire pouring out of the battery system. So Russia and China have products to export. People want to do business with them. And the United States is out there with its force of arms trying to say, you must go through us to conduct global economic trade. You must go through the dollar. They're trying to force a return to Bretton Woods, and the rest of the world has had it. Now, speaking of bamboozling the rest of the world, of course, and rising on a busted flush, you know, just like the U.S. Holocaust Memorial is out there trying to raise the numbers. It wasn't 6, it was 20. It was horrible. You must pay attention to us. The United Nations is playing the same game. They're out there pushing this global warming and saying it's worse than we thought it was going to be. It's scarier. If nobody believes in what you're selling, make it bigger. Make it more spectacular. Make it newsworthy. And it's another busted flush. The Arctic ice is the highest it's been in 7 years. Over in Al Gore's home state, he's living out in California now, but in his home state, the very late winter has encroached on the arrival of spring. The entire state of Tennessee is covered with snow. Temperatures are forecast to continue far below the normal. And if you think it's bad there, you should be in Japan. Because in some parts of Japan around the town of Tsukayu, the snow on either side of the road is as high as a 2-story building. The snow is killing people in Japan, including an entire family stranded in a car. Now, Maryland is under a winter storm warning. This is March, remember. Come in like a lion, go out like a lamb, and Maryland is getting ready for 5 inches of snow, according to the forecast there. And yes, in response to emails, we do have snow here in Hawaii. It's down on the peaks of the Big Island, up by the observatory. There's actually a ski run on the Big Island. There are companies on the Big Island that sell ski equipment. You can go skiing up on the top of the peaks in the morning and go surfing on the beaches in the afternoon. But we do get it here. And they're still pushing it. It's going to be worse. It's terrible. And I saw this ludicrous show over the weekend where they got in some of these same climate experts who 10 years ago were saying snow is a thing of the past. And they're trying to sell this idea that, well, global warming leads to more snow, which is not what they were saying 10 years ago. And just because there's blizzards and ice and everywhere is no reason to be a heretic to the faith of human-caused global warming. They're still trying to sell this thing because they're desperate for a carbon tax. And they're desperate to get you to do as you're told by a global environmental authority, which clearly does not know what they're talking about. The proof of the pudding, as they say, is whether their dire warnings come to pass, and they have not. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, with regard to this file-sharing crackdown, protecting copyrights, protecting the profits of the media corporations, first of all, it's not going to return these corporations to profitability. Because the real problem is, under the pressure of the marketing people, the stories being chosen for films are, for the most part, pretty bland, politically correct, rehashes of something we have seen so many times before. We're just not interested. We reported a while back where music corporations are literally using computer software to tailor all the new releases of music to sound just like the stuff that sold very well before, which means there really isn't much purpose to buy the new discs. But these corporate managers don't want to admit a failure of imagination and a lack of courage to try something new and daring. So they're going to blame the pirates. And pirates are a problem, but they're not the problem with corporate profitability. Plus, in this consumer economy, people don't have money to buy new CDs, new DVDs, new Blu-rays. I gave up buying Blu-rays after that debacle with this. My monitor didn't have the correct chip to accept a Blu-ray on my computer, and you must go buy a new monitor. It's just too much trouble. Quit. Not even worth it anymore. But over in Japan, they introduced one of the toughest laws in the world for dealing with online piracy, and apparently they just arrested 27 file sharers in a nationwide show of force. Cracked down. They did searches on 124 locations, arrested 27 people for online infringement. Those arrested face up to 10 years in jail. Now, I'll tell you what their mistake was. Instead of sharing movies and music, if they'd been rigging the LIBOR rates, they would never have been arrested. They might even have gotten a cash bonus. So, word to the wise, don't steal copyrighted material, but get into financial fraud and the police will never touch you. Let's see. On to beef or not to beef. That's true beef or not true beef. That is equestrian. The horse meat scandal is continuing. 4 new products have tested positive. Products from Bird's Eye, Taco Bell have been found to contain horse DNA. 3rd wave of tests. Now, I DNA tested some horseradish, and there was no horse in it at all. So this food fraud thing has gone on far enough. Actually, what's going on is you're being introduced to the new normal. They don't have enough cows to feed the human race, but there is a surplus of horses. And as a matter of fact, they've just approved a slaughterhouse to process horse meat here in the United States of America. So we're going to start seeing it here. Why don't we have enough cows? Well, cows are being fed on GMO corn. It's not even their natural diet. Cows are supposed to eat grass. But in these giant factory farms, they feed the cows on GMO corn. They load them up with chemicals to plump them up, and a lot of these cows are dying. Anyway. Let's see. Getting onto the whole vaccine situation. According to the CDC, the combined influenza vaccine, which was first administered during the 2009 H1N1 pandemic flu season, and remember, it wasn't really a pandemic. They artificially lowered the threshold to declare pandemic and send you all scurrying out to your doctors and pharmacies to get your shot. Made huge amounts of money for the pharmaceutical industries. The CDC claimed that this combined influenza vaccine was perfectly safe, they always say that, and encouraged pregnant women to get the shot. But a new study published in the journal Human and Environmental Toxicology reveals that following the mass administration of this untested dual vaccine, remember that whole fast-track thing, which included mercury-based thimerosal, miscarriages and stillbirths among pregnant women who received it shot up by 4,250%. Now, apparently there's another situation that people need to be aware of. A man has been infected by a smallpox virus after intimate contact with someone who had just gotten the vaccine. In other words, you don't have to get the vaccine itself to be at health risk. If you're engaging in intimate contact with somebody who got the shot, you can still get its effects. And apparently this infected 24-year-old from San Diego then passed the virus on to another man. Tertiary transmission. So there's a new smallpox problem, and it appears to be from the smallpox vaccine. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. And speaking of health topics here, you probably use a loyalty card when you go to your supermarket. Swipe the card, you supposedly get a discount. The discounts are getting smaller and smaller, and ultimately you're paying for all this anyway. Their markets aren't doing this out of the goodness of their own hearts. And people have been worried about privacy issues with these cards, and well, they should be. It turns out now that grocery chains are selling that data on your purchasing habits, not only to marketers for targeted advertising, but to your health insurance companies. So if you're buying and consuming products that could lead to certain health concerns, they will use that information to raise your insurance premiums, and in some cases to deny claims entirely. How wonderful Obamacare is turning out to be. Of course, we could all start swapping our grocery loyalty cards. I just don't bother using them. I don't want anybody to know what I'm buying. I'm not buying anything that should be of concern to anybody. Shopping pretty much as organic as I can right now. But that's my business. It's not for anybody else to know. I guess I'm one of those antique, aged, Luddite curmudgeons who want a certain degree of privacy in my life. All right, going to grab a phone call here. Wes in Idaho. Aloha, Wes. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Smallpox vaccination. You're criticizing it now? I thought you said it was good and effective.
No, I never said that. And what the story was about was that apparently one person got this smallpox vaccination, which is being marketed because of the potential of a bioterror attack, because smallpox in nature is just all but gone, but it's another product to sell to healthy people. And what happened is the person who got the shot had an intimate encounter with a second person who came down with a smallpox-like illness, but not before he had in turn, through another sexual encounter, passed it on to a third person. We may have a new smallpox epidemic on our hands being caused by the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah, well, that's nothing new. I called you about a month ago when I heard you say that some vaccinations were good, and I wanted to ask you. I said, well, Mike, which vaccinations were ever good? And you said smallpox.
I understand where the confusion came from. The original smallpox vaccine that was made from cowpox did in fact seem to work. This is a whole new one where they've taken the smallpox virus itself and modified it. So this is a completely different smallpox vaccination we're talking about. And apparently it creates a communicable condition in the people who get this shot.
I just got 3 more books on vaccination from Vaccination Liberation today. I've got about 35 books on vaccination. Do you know what actually caused smallpox?
Please enlighten us.
I'm coming across this. It was actually a bed bug. I know that sounds incredible, but I found it here. Well, the first time I actually found it... Well, that's not incredible.
That's not incredible. I mean, we know that back in that time, insect transmission of diseases was a main reason for some of these pandemics. We know the Black Plague was spread by fleas that were on rats. We know that a lot of insect transmission, mosquitoes and malaria is another good example.
Well, the point is, I've looked at this for about 25, 30 years. It's sanitation.
I agree.
They did away with virtually all infectious diseases, and when you don't pay attention to sanitation, like in Haiti, they have cholera from their earthquakes a number of years back. They never had really good sanitation even before the earthquakes. The point is, third world nations still have some problems with these infectious diseases because they just don't do good sanitation and hygiene that is necessary. The washing machine did more to get rid of smallpox than any doggone vaccination. No, never.
Okay.
Any vaccination good and effective. They have created a whole new type of disease. It's called degenerative.
Let me ask you a question. Polio. You're telling me that polio was spontaneously disappearing from the human population when the Salk vaccine came along?
It was in great decline before the vaccination was introduced, and then
what caused the decline?
Sanitation would logically be.
No, don't. I don't want to. I don't want to guess here. I mean, I'm not dismissing your thesis here. And I'm certainly not dismissing the idea that vaccine salesmen would not take advantage of a natural decline in a disease to push another brand of medication here. It's just, I don't think you can make a blanket assumption that that's the case in every single one of these cases. And again, polio being the situation, yes, obviously hygiene and sanitation goes to a great degree to destroy the vector of transmission of the diseases. But on the other hand, again, in the case with polio, which was highly infectious, it did seem to die out about the time that the Salk vaccine became ineffective. Now, if you say something else was getting rid of polio, you may well be right. I mean, people change their behavior. They stop getting close to people during periods of highly infectious disease. We know that a lot of things will come along. During the Spanish influenza, I don't know why they named it that. It came from America. Of 1918, they discovered people working in cinnamon processing factories to make cinnamon for bakeries just didn't get it because they were inhaling the dust from grinding up the tree bark. So it's a complicated issue, and I'm not averse to the idea that sanitation and hygiene can reduce these pandemics, and I know a lot of the vaccines we're seeing today are very reckless and potentially harmful. I'm not willing to write 100% of them off as being ineffective. I think we need to judge them on a case-by-case basis. There is merit in what you're saying, but again, I think we need to evaluate them one at a time. So I'm going to let you go here because we're running out of time and we've got other callers on the line. I'd like to switch to Mike in Minnesota. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. As far as the selling of information a while back, and they probably still do it, can I mention the name of the store or no?
Why not?
Okay, Office Depot. They got this box in there to lure you in to get your computer ink cartridges half off by getting them filled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something didn't seem right. So I talked to one of the kids actually doing it, and they got a machine there. Well, what they do is they actually download all the information that you ever printed on there. They put it into a hard drive, okay? And he said, and this was the sheeple excuse was, well, so we need to clean it up so there's no information on there, so you can put new information on there.
You're talking about the computer servicing, not the refilling the ink cartridges, because there's no way the ink cartridge itself is saving everything you've printed. The printer does. In many of the higher-end printers, there is an internal hard drive that is used by police forensics, but the cartridge itself doesn't remember what it prints.
Well, that's what he told me. He said they actually take off all the information off of it or whatever, and then they fill it.
No, there's no information on the ink cartridge itself to be gleaned. It simply doesn't have the capacity. If you take the printer in, that's a completely different story. If you take your computer in, that's a completely different story. And as a general rule, not just Office Depot, if you're having to take your computer or laptop into some place to have it serviced and you've got something on there that you want to keep private, you need to put it on a flash drive, and you need to get one of these free tools that you can get for your computer that erases the unused space on the disk. Because if you have a file with your secret recipe for homemade chili that you're going to found a restaurant on, and you delete it, the actual file is still there on the hard drive. Now, all the delete key does is remove the reference to it from the file management system, and it's still there. So you need to get one of these disk wipers, like Eraser for XP. There's also one for the iPhone, and I presume there's something similar for the Mac.
Well, I took my thing in once, and I think that's all a done deal now in a small town to get my computer a modem installed. And the guy says, well, here, let me just get rid of some of the information on it. I'll free up your deal or whatever. And he stuck this little, probably a multi-gigabyte, it was hanging from a keychain, just a little bitty thing, and he put it in the little deal there. And I'm like, well, it was a done deal then.
Well,
and the guy did it so damn fast, I didn't have time to say, hey, get the hell away from my computer. You know what I mean? Oh, my God.
Okay, well, you know,
honestly,
I'm running out of time, and I'm going to let you go here. I'm going to let you go here. I don't know about fast. You know, there's a finite amount of time to copy off a disk, and it does take a while. It's not going to be instantaneous. And printer cartridges from your printer do not store what you print. The printer does. The higher-end printers especially. Like office-level printers. Home printers, generally not. One thing printers do is they will print onto, if you have a color printer, there's a pattern of yellow dots that identifies the printer. It's very hard to see unless you put it under a blue light, but every printer that does color, laserjet, color inkjet, has this pattern of yellow dots that's put onto every single document to identify the printer. So if you write a letter and send it through the post office, they can still find you. Just something to keep in mind. According to Manny in our control room, Disk Doctor for Mac will blank the unused space on your disk drive. The newer version of CCleaner will do it for Windows operating systems. I didn't know that. I was using Eraser. But again, if you've got something that you need to keep really private, operate on a flash drive. They're incredibly small. You can get a 64 gigabyte mini SD card that will hide inside a hollowed out nickel. So for your new plans for that great invention that you're getting ready to do, and you don't want somebody at TSA or the Department of Homeland Security, if you live within 150 miles of a border, if you don't want them to get that new product idea and sell it to somebody on Wall Street who can put it into production faster than you can, you know, go flash drives here. We already know all of these government officials who are able to go into your smartphones and tablets and laptops and computers, they'll steal anything they think they can make a fast buck on. It was a huge scandal at the Asia-Pacific Economic Conference up in Seattle when we lived there. FBI was raiding the computers of everybody there, not looking for crimes and criminals, but for corporate intelligence that could be sold or given to political cronies. The biggest threat to your private data is the government under the guise of terrorism. And they're all in the back room giggling over the personal private photos you took of your significant other on your honeymoon. Alrighty, moving right along. Getting back to the health issues. Interesting story out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. Doctors don't even trust their own hospitals. Somebody did a survey and found out 1/3 of health service workers would not recommend their own workplace to their friends and family. If they were asked, should I go to your hospital, they'd say, no, you don't want to go there. You want to go someplace else here. Apparently, the Department of Health's own survey found that 1/3 of National Health Service staff had witnessed medical blunders or near misses at least once in the preceding month. Nearly 1/4 of workers had been harassed or bullied by other colleagues to not report mistakes. You're far more likely to die from a medical mistake than from an assault rifle. But they're not going to take away stethoscopes here. By the most conservative estimate from mainstream medical sources, the U.S. medical system kills 225,000 people every year. That's 2.25 million deaths per decade. Wall of silence from the corporate media. The guns are bad. The guns are evil. They've killed 26 people. Doctors are far more dangerous to your health and life than assault rifle is. Now, the corporate media is going for the fluff. They've been trying to wave Trayvon Martin around again. They tried to bring back the Gary Condit scandal again. And now they're bringing back Michael Jackson. You know, they spent all morning on this airplane, was going to crash land. At the last second, they got the landing gear down and landed safely. But Michael Jackson's back in the news because apparently some email has surfaced that the promoters of Michael Jackson's revival tour were influencing Michael Jackson's own doctor to keep him juiced up so that he would be ready to go on this concert tour. He was missing rehearsals, and the promoter told the doctor, look, give him whatever it takes to get him to rehearsals. Another reason not to trust medical professionals. Apparently, Niger has arrested 20 doctors for graft. They were embezzling money from a charity set up by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to promote vaccination in poor countries. Ugly, ugly, ugly. Now, we were talking before about how the Obama administration just let all these illegal aliens out of the prisons because of sequestration and budget cuts. And a lot of people were outraged because many of these people are criminals. It now turns out health officials in Los Angeles are saying the cause of the drug-resistant tuberculosis outbreak in Los Angeles may track back to infected illegal aliens sneaking across the border, coming up to Los Angeles, and hiding out in these areas while they try and basically get plugged into all the free services. But Iran is the problem. Iran must be dealt with. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. One more story about computers. We're all familiar with Microsoft Office. Big, bloated, expensive, tons of features in there none of us are ever really realistically going to use. And you might want to look at OpenOffice, which is free. Well, Microsoft is planning a major price increase on the standalone at-home version of Microsoft Office for this year. But they have their online Office web apps free. And they embody not all of the features of Microsoft Office, but a good number of them, and they're being heavily promoted. And this is a story coming out of ZDNet, that if you don't want to pay for the big Microsoft Office for your home computer, you can go on the web and sign up to use the Office web apps, and you'll even get 7 gigabytes of free storage on Microsoft's cloud. How very generous of Microsoft. I don't think so. Because again, if you're saving your data on the cloud, it is open to perusal by the people managing the cloud, by the government. Remember that deacon we were talking about earlier in the show was into child porn. And his big mistake was he was storing some of it on the cloud, and Verizon turned him in. And we're seeing a very concerted push to return to the days of mainframe computing, where your laptop, even your desktop, your tablet certainly, and your smartphone is a terminal for content delivery, and all the data and processing is well away from you on the remote mainframe. This is the model of computing that we saw in the 1970s and early 1980s, before home computing really took off. And I think the reason for that agenda is so the government is able to go in and look at what you're doing, scan what you're doing, to make sure you're not doing something they don't approve of. And the danger in that is that anything you're working to develop commercially could be looted off, given to a political crony, or they could simply look at a product you're getting ready to announce and go off to the stock market and buy a bunch of your stock. That's insider trading. And we've seen that so many times, it's beyond question. This is what is happening with much of this data being surveilled. And so again, proving I'm one of these Luddites, I want my data in my own home, under my own control, on my own hard drive or flash drive. And I don't want to use the cloud, because the cloud is insecure. The cloud is wide open. So, there's the music. That's our show for today. We'll be back tomorrow on pardon me, the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, share what you know with who you know, have the courage to speak out, send in the pictures of you and your spouse having a happy moment and a happy marriage, and aloha America.